You are now live.
Okay, thank you. So I'll call the meeting to order, and I'll start with our usual land acknowledgement that Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. And then, so I will have the committee members introduce themselves just briefly. So I'm Tony Bluin, the current chair of the board. David, are you there? Yes.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. My name's David Foster. I'm the current vice chair.
Rebecca Parker.
Rebecca has not joined us yet.
Okay. Mimi O'Hanley.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mimi O'Hanley.
Hi, new member?
This is my second meeting.
Second, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Stu Campagna.
Hi, everybody.
Yep. Martin Willison.
Hello, I'm Martin Willison.
Sloan Mandeville.
Yes, I'm Mr. Chairman. I have a problem with the way we have order. If you remember a year ago when I addressed the board, so I was advised by one of the staff members to turn off the video. I think the staff turned off the video because I tried to turn it back on. It says,
I just sent you an invite, Shalom, to start your video.
Okay.
See if that invitation is coming up there.
The clerk is to know me to, once you see my
Shalom, your audio is breaking up. It might be better if you left the video off because you may not have enough bandwidth to do both.
Off.
We did want to just turn it on for a moment. Just all board members have to be seen and heard. So we were thinking maybe he could turn it on for a moment and then just to show that he's here and his camera works, and then turn it off for the remainder of the meeting. But I'll send you that invitation, Shalom, and we can keep going if you wish.
Okay, so we'll come back if Shalom is able to get his video. Next on my list is Susan Belford.
Hi, I'm new.
Oh. Hello, Susan.
Hi,
I think
nice to join the group.
before. Your name is very familiar to me. I'm not sure.
I've been around for decades.
Me too. Okay. And finally, Ahmad Al-Mala. Is Ahmad here?
Yes, exactly. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you. New member also, I think.
It's my first meeting, exactly.
Okay, good. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we did get regrets from Sio Godet and Lindsay Bedard. They won't be here this evening. And our support staff, we have Emma Watty, who's the manager of environment for HRM, Elizabeth Montgomery, and Elizabeth McDonald.
Hello.
First item on our agenda is the election of a chair and then the election of a vice chair. I'm currently chair. I will say if anyone is interested in doing this, I've been doing it for a year. So I certainly wouldn't object if we rotated the chair, between people, but we'll see how the membership wants to do it. So I'll turn it over to the legislative assistant to run the election for chair.
All right, so I will open the floor for nominations for the position of chair for the Regional Watersheds Advisory Board.
I move that Tony Bluin continue as chair.
Right.
I enthusiastically second that.
And that was
David Foster.
David. Perfect. All right, I will call for any further nominations. I will call a second time for any further nominations. And a third time for any further nominations. Seeing none, we would need a mover and a seconder for the chair, to cease nominations for the chair.
I move that nominations cease.
Second move.
And we'll need a seconder for that.
I'll second that.
Perfect. All right, I will declare Tony the successful candidate for the chair of the Regional Watersheds Advisory Board. Now I will hand it back off to Tony to run the election of the vice chair.
So I will call for nominations for vice chair. I see Shalom's hand is up. Shalom, do you wish to do a nomination?
Order.
Sorry, I don't think we have a good connection with Shalom tonight. Anyone else nomination for vice chair? Elizabeth, am I allowed to nominate? I would nominate David to continue as vice.
Yeah, you absolutely can nominate.
Okay.
And you'll need a seconder.
Anyone seconder for David Foster as vice chair?
I second the motion.
Calling for any other nominations?
All right, so now we would just need you to call 3 times for any further nominations.
Okay, any other nominations for vice chair? Second time, any other nominations for vice chair? And third and final time, any nominations? That's it. Elizabeth, back to you.
Yeah, so seeing none, you can call to appoint David Foster as the vice chair.
Okay, so we need a motion to appoint David Foster as vice chair. I have someone put a motion to that effect.
So
Perhaps, am I allowed to do that? I could put a motion to elect David as vice chair.
yeah, so you put that motion on the floor. We had that seconded by Martin. There were no further nominations. So we will cease nominations and you can go ahead to appoint the motion to appoint David Foster to vice chair. And you can call for all those in favor, all those opposed.
So putting a motion for David Foster as vice chair of the board. All those in favor? You have an indication, hands up. Okay, that's good. Any opposed? Seeing none, I would say that that's confirmed.
Perfect. I was just chatting with Krista and she was saying actually that the chair cannot move forward a motion, but you can second, so we can do Tony can move the motion, or sorry, Martin can move the motion, you can second. That's okay.
I
Yeah,
so
hi.
move.
For procedural, you can put forward a nomination, Chair, but when it comes to the appointment itself, it really should be, the chair can't necessarily move motions, or they can't move motions, so therefore they can second, but we have it in order now.
That was our last meeting. So I would call for a motion to approve those minutes as drafted. Need a mover and a seconder.
I'll move.
Okay, so Stu has moved it.
Yep, I'll second that.
Okay. So calling for the question. All those in favor? With hands, I guess, easiest. Okay. Any opposed? Okay, seeing none, I would say we have approved those minutes. Motion is carried. And number 3, approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. So I'll ask the legislative assistant, do we have any additions or deletions?
There are no additions or deletions from the clerk's office.
Okay, so motion to approve the order of business. Again, we always need a mover and a seconder.
I'll move that.
I can second.
Okay. Call for the question. All those in favor of the order of business as it's drafted? Show of hands, please. Okay. Any opposed? All right, so we have the motion carried to approve the order of business. Next item was business arising out of the minutes. I believe there are none. And call for a declaration of conflict of interests. Do any of the members have what they would perceive as a conflict of interest with any of our agenda items tonight? Seeing none, I think we'll just proceed. Item 6, consideration of deferred business. We have none, I believe. And correspondence, petitions, and delegations. Ask the clerk to confirm we have no correspondence received.
The clerk's office did not receive any correspondence.
Okay, similarly for petitions.
There were no petitions received.
Okay, and then request to make a presentation.
No, and there are no presentations.
Okay. And we have no information items brought forward. So we can
Yep,
move
there are
on
none.
to none. Okay. And moving on then, item 9.1, the first report or presentation from staff. Or sorry, the first item is our meeting schedule. So we need a motion that the Regional Watershed Advisory Board approve the proposed 2023 meeting schedule that had been circulated by the clerk's office.
I move.
Okay, Shalom, I'll move motion. Seconder.
I second the motion.
Okay, Martin. All those in favor of the motion? Okay, any opposed? All right, so we will adopt the proposed board meeting schedule that the clerk's office had circulated.
Can I ask you a quick question on that?
Yes, certainly.
Does that mean that the legislative assistant will send out a series of invites to those meetings for the purposes of adding to calendars?
I believe so. I think they do that prior to each meeting. I'll just ask the clerk, could you confirm that?
Yeah, absolutely. Now that the meeting schedule has been passed, then I will send out calendar invitations for meetings for the rest of the year.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, so we have item 9.1.2, an update on Penhorn Lake. I understand there is no presentation here, but Elizabeth Montgomery will provide an update on that topic.
Hi, yeah, I have some notes, no presentation at this time, but I do have, you'll just have to bear with me. It's about a page of notes. Okay, so as Tony had requested an update on a sedimentation event that happened in Penhorn Lake off the former Penhorn Mall site in this winter. So this is that. So on January 26th of this year, there was sediment runoff observed from the construction site at the former Penhorn Mall site. Sediment was observed running downslope into Penhorn Lake by the construction site inspector. So this happened just after a major rainfall. There was an earthwork berm constructed immediately to contain the runoff, and also a new erosion and sedimentation control plan was developed immediately by the contractor whose responsibility it was. And this was implemented within 48 hours. then those were the immediate emergency actions. There was quite a lot of groundwater in the lake, so they reacted pretty quickly. It was pretty visible. Further action taken by the contractor to contain the runoff as per the new erosion and sedimentation control plan that was developed after this runoff event included the installation of an additional silt boom in the water to extend further down the lake in the location experiencing construction runoff, a rock berm along the top of the slope to contain water on site better than had been done previously, pumping out of the retention ponds that were constructed on site to contain water further on site prior to subsequent rainfall events, check dams built along the slope at weak points, and sloping the site towards the sedimentation pond rather than just maintaining a flat construction site, and expanding the sedimentation pond so that it would be able to contain more water. Also, turbid water was observed discharging via groundwater into the lake. And so that they think that there was some geotechnical issues with the sedimentation pond, and so they think that there was the water was coming through groundwater and into the lake that way as well. And so to remediate that, additional silt curtains were added in the lake as soon as ice cover allowed. It did freeze right after this rainfall event, so some of this took a little bit of time. The silt curtains and booms installed in the lake were installed as soon as the ice was removed, but there wasn't a lot that they could do before the ice melted. Then in February, a second rainfall event happened on the 20th, and the ground was frozen, which caused further issues with sedimentation that hadn't been addressed by the original changes to the erosion and sedimentation control plan, because the ground wasn't frozen in January during the first event. So a second stormwater impoundment formed kind of naturally and then was buttressed up on the northwest side of the lake. This was addressed immediately, and no further sedimentation events have been observed into the lake from this construction site since this February 20th event. So just in general, as an update, the contractor and the developer were really proactive about this, so they weren't ticketed, but the Department of the Environment and our compliance and development offices were heavily involved and worked with them quickly to come up with a sufficient erosion and sedimentation control plan. And the reason that was determined that the plan that they had in place originally with the construction failed was just because of the high intensity of the January storm, and then the frozen ground on the February storm, and another incredibly high intensity rainstorm, which just wouldn't be expected in winter when the ground would be lower permeability because of being frozen. And then, we are monitoring Penhorn Lake. It is monitored under 2 different water quality monitoring programs. So the Lake Watchers program, which you've heard about at this board before, samples Penhorn Lake in the spring and summer annually. The spring sampling has taken place for 2023. So we don't have results yet, but when we get those results, we should be able to compare to last year. This monitors for general water chemistry, and we may see indication of the effects of the sedimentation event in Penhorn Lake based on that sampling. We also keep a really close eye on Penhorn Lake over the summer through our beach program, which is happening on the lake. So, we may see increased bacteria or phosphorus due to the sedimentation. And we'll be able to see that through the lake monitoring that we're doing through the beach program. And also we monitor on an ongoing basis for cyanobacteria. And just to close, this is a statement that came from Nova Scotia Environment and Climate Change's Inspection Enforcement and Compliance Officer, who was working with the developer. This is just a follow-up, for the kind of to show what precautions the department is taking in the future. So the department, NSECC, is currently developing a set of erosion control standards and best practices that will be incorporated into our programs. This effort is being conducted to try and prevent future issues with sediment and erosion control. Major stakeholders have been consulted in this effort, including but not limited to current environment and climate change approval holders, and that's provincial environment and climate change approval holders, contracts, and municipal development departments. Communication around this initiative should be shared with all appropriate stakeholders as it gets closer to release, and this new approach is being undertaken to strengthen controls for siltation around waterways. And they did consult with us at Environment and Climate Change at the city on this as well. And our understanding is that this is to standardize the types of erosion and sedimentation control that are being done on construction sites as part of the approval, and to ensure that these erosion and sedimentation control plans always exist prior to these events happening, and that there's a channel for quick response and a response plan enacted. So in the event that there is a sedimentation event, the response will be quicker and more standardized across all construction sites in the province. So I can take questions, but that's the gist of the update that we got from development engineering and environment and climate change at the province. Yeah, Tony?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Ms. McDonald, Montgomery, I mean. My friends of the Bannock Area Residents Association, they are the ones who putting the aerator there. Remember when we discussed that last February, were they consulted about this problem or no? Or it's not the job of the HRM?
I believe the Penhorn Lakes and Trails Association, who would be the Trails Association like most closely associated with Penhorn Lake, were consulted. I can get back to you on that, but I believe that they were involved in the response, and I know that the counselor spoke to them for sure to talk about potential effects this might have on the lake in the upcoming season. The Bannock Area Residents Association, I don't think were consulted, but I think just because of it they're not as related to Penhorn Lake.
Yeah, maybe I didn't explain well. It is the members of the Bannock Area Residents Association. I don't want to mention names for certain reason. First name is Jeff. They are the ones who are putting the aerator there. I took pictures, we did some data, everything. But if it's not the function of HRM, that's okay. I understand. And one thing I want to mention to Municipal Clerk's Assistant Clerk, can they turn the video back on, because I'm on my cell phone now, because my computer was giving me trouble.
Yep, I can send you an invite to turn your video back.
Thank you.
Sending that right now.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Shalom, just to answer your question better, I think that as far as I know, that's not our aerator. So we're not operating it. So I don't know when it will be turned on this year.
Okay, thank you.
I think David has his hand up there. David, do you have a question or comment?
I do. First a comment. So there's I'm hearing a lot that the developer was proactive in the process, and certainly there were control measures in place in advance. But I would say that as far as responding to the type of event that we saw in January, February, which there is a lot of representation of that as being an extreme event or something unexpected. But I think that we increasingly have to expect that degree of event in our region under changing climate, and that the idea that the ground is frozen in January, but we get liquid precipitation, I don't think that should be something that is a surprise to us anymore. And so the idea that they were being proactive, I think is only, in my estimation, is only partially true. I think that they were quickly reactive to the situation, and that's good, but it's a really important distinction because they did a bunch of stuff after this problem happened that showed that while they did a bunch, there was more that could have been done to be proactive. So I'm wondering, and so my question right off the get-go, you've addressed a little bit already, Elizabeth. So thank you. And that is about, what do we learn from this, and what can we do to make sure? And so the province is bringing in a new set of standards. I'm wondering, what levers does HRM have to ensure a high standard of environmental protection, whether it's in conjunction with or maybe in addition to Nova Scotia standards? Because like you mentioned, that we want a standard that is high and applies across the province. But can we expect? Are we allowed, as people in HRM, to expect a higher standard than is ensured in other parts of the province? Can we set? What are the levers there? I'll stop talking.
Some of this I can answer, some of it I can take a stab at and get back to you. So we agree, that with the effects of climate change, like these unprecedented storms are going to become more common. And when we can, like the province did take the time to consult with us on their stormwater standards, and we do meet with them fairly regularly about this kind of thing, and we advise them roughly the same thing that you said. I have not seen these standards, so I can't speak to what they resulted in. I think, and again, it isn't our group that sets these kind of engineering standards or really responds to them. So I can pass that along and get you a better answer, like specifically what mechanisms we have. But it is mostly my understanding that we at HRM are looking to adopt provincial standards rather than set our own, because it's the province who responds to these types of events. So like when there's a sedimentation event, our development engineering team would work with the contractor to ensure that, what went wrong and why did it go wrong. But the enforcement aspect does predominantly come from Nova Scotia Environment, as I understand it. So I think, we can have a larger discussion as a community about whether those are adequate or not, I think. But from our perspective, what we see our team's role in particular is pushing the province to set like high standards that will specifically and sufficiently protect our water bodies. Emma, did you want to add anything? Okay.
I think you covered it. Just to say that like we are trying to work with the province, and like I agree with David that a lot, like we're trying to be proactive, but like sometimes we have like this, the nature of things is that we end up being reactive, and we have to expect stronger, like wetter winters. So like we realize that, and we are kind of trying to work within our own means, and then also work with our colleagues at the province to see like how we can work together to not be as reactive.
If I could just add a quick follow on to that, no real additional question, but just to say that, we have a unique set of challenges here in any real urban environment in Nova Scotia. And while the province has to set a standard that equally applies everywhere, the cities or large towns have additional stresses on their water bodies. And so there's sort of a even uniquer set of circumstances there. And so I'm happy to hear that HRM is working with the province in the development of that. But I am interested in further discussion down the road about how perhaps through development agreements, higher standards can be set to ensure that we don't see going down the wrong road that sets a bad trajectory for a lake. Because I mean, lakes like Penhorn and close to that, Oat Hill, they are stressed enough as it is with all kinds of issues. So last thing we need is massive set.
Okay, thanks, David. On to Steve Belford, you have your hand up.
Hi. Yeah, just follow up on your description there, Elizabeth. What the flag that raised up was the multiple times that a silk curtain was deemed to be sufficient at that time reactivity, which it's not. I mean, that's too late. So that shouldn't be seen as from construction, erosion sediment control planning to be sufficient. Because, but I said sediment, which carries the phosphorus, is already in the lake, and you're hooped by that time. You're not really doing anything. But this may be very, very detailed in terms of what the planning, and if we're looking at bigger plans, from my experience has been urban erosion sediment control planning from the work I used to do a while ago. And so the province, there's quite a comprehensive menu that you apply specifically to a site based on its characteristics. And if it's not being applied, again, no need to reinvent the wheel. Those things are there. It just what's produced and who vets it, I guess. And if the city part of the development agreement needs to be part of that, I guess, and that's where the way we're going.
So yeah, I guess maybe to clarify, there was an erosion and sedimentation control plan developed and agreed upon and put in place as part of the development agreement that negotiated between the developer and the city. So and the silt curtain that I referred to, like there were sedimentation ponds on site. There were like erosion and sedimentation controls that were deemed appropriate by our approvals process before. I think what we saw from like the rainfall intensity that we saw in January was not that they didn't exist, but that they were insufficient. So and so I think like point taken, once the silt's in the water, the silt's in the water. And I think part like the goal is to set a higher standard to do this in the future. But again, I mean, what we're able to do on top of what the province requires is not my job really to comment on. I think not my job. I mean, I don't mean it's my role. I mean, I don't know in detail enough because of the nature of my job to say that to you. But I do think like I said in response to David, like we are pushing that these controls become more stringent as we know, these kind of extreme weather events are coming in the future. And you're right, like depending what was in place on the site prior to this rainfall event was, they had a construction inspector on site. It was deemed sufficient. It turned out not to be. And so, but it wasn't that there was nothing there. And I guess to answer
back in the day when I was working on some of the urban sites, like the old Home Depot site, I know this at that time, the city required a 1 in 5 year storm. We convinced Home Depot, I said, we're going to put in 1 in 100 year settling pond. They wanted state of the art. And as we know, hurricanes become more frequently, we moved up to 1 in 200 year storm for holding capacity. So that's, again, haven't been done this for a while, so I don't know what the engineers are requiring as a minimum, but 1 in 5 is not sufficient, and maybe they've upped their game, but 1 in 100 year storms is a minimum. But I've seen 2 1 in 100 year storms in a year on a golf course I was working at. So again, definitely up that number.
I can confirm with you what the requirement is now. I don't have it at my fingertips.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions or comments from the members?
Can I speak, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please.
Okay, if you remember from the old days, as you know, we have been around for a long time as activists. The city used to have, like, through the, it was called construction engineering, or John Shepard headed that, if you recall. And he always had 50 milligrams per liter at source, not in the lake, because that's too high, 50 milligrams per liter sediment. Now, what I'd like to ask one of the staff members, I know there are several there, Sue, Emma Waddy and others, are they still enforcing that now? So it's a simple question.
So, Shalom, we do like that. I think now they're development off engineers that are the new titles, I guess, for those folks. And we do have a grading lot bylaw, and I do not know the exact number off the top of my head, but there is a number for sedimentation control for each at the source. And it's our colleagues in development and planning and the development engineers who would maintain that through the Red Book, the updated Red Book that came out a few years ago for sedimentation control at the site of what we can do.
Thanks, Ms. Waddy.
Of course.
I have them. I have those numbers here now. I just found them. So Sue, to answer your question, we're requiring. This is the requirement. Retaining stormwater on site means that it does not leave the site. This is 1 in 10 millimeter. Oh my goodness, sorry, reading the wrong spot here. Basically, they need to keep the first 10 millimeters captured with a 1 in 5 year storm return period. And it's 80% of TSS that needs to be contained. But those would be in the erosion and sedimentation control plans approved like during the development agreement process.
So it's still fairly low, 1 in 5 year storm.
Yes, that's the administrative orders requirements right now.
Okay, thanks. Any other members, comments or questions? I can say that from my own experience, it certainly is a shared jurisdiction between municipalities and the province. The lakes legally are provincial property, but the municipalities control land development, and that's the activity which leads to these sort of events and can cause the problems. So it'll be interesting to see when the province produces its new standards. Perhaps could I ask staff, when you become aware of them, if you could just let the board know that the province has released a new set so that we could perhaps have a chance to look at them?
Yeah, we can do that. And we expect them this year. So I don't remember the exact timeline, but I think sooner rather than later.
Okay, thanks. All right, well, thank you for that. I think that's it for this item. Our next item is a presentation on the Bedford West Water Quality Monitoring Program. We have Elizabeth and Emma to make that presentation, so I'll ask them whenever they're ready to go ahead.
So I am Elizabeth and Emma. I'll just promote you to co-host so you can share your screen. Just hold on a moment there.
You can just do Elizabeth.
I can see the
Okay,
share
sure.
screen item. Oh, never mind.
Is the invitation coming up for co-host?
Can you see my screen?
Yes. If you could just full screen it as well, that would be perfect. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so I only have one screen right now, so feel free to stop me with questions during the presentation, but know that I can't see you. So if you have, please, if you have a question, feel free to just jump in, but I can't see raised hands. So just so you all know. So this is an update on the Bedford West Water Quality Monitoring Program. We're reporting on the last 4 years for various reasons. That is where we are at with our reporting now. After this update, we will be resuming an annual presentation or an annual reporting schedule once again, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So just where there's some new folks here, I can just give some background. Under the Bedford West Secondary Planning Strategy, which is relates to lands in the Bedford West area around Kearney Lake predominantly and Paper Mill Lake, under the development agreements that govern that secondary planning area, a water quality monitoring program was specified in the planning strategy, and this is in response to the municipality's statement that best management practices may be needed both during development and afterward to maintain water quality in the lakes, and that's the lakes surrounding this Bedford West development, and that a water quality monitoring program will be established on lakes throughout the watershed. This was published in the Bedford West Secondary Planning Strategy in 2006, and the water quality monitoring program has been going on since the beginning of those developments that are happening underneath those development agreements. So the program overview, there are 13 secondary planning areas under Bedford West. 10 of them they're broken ground, finished, or under development currently. The 11th one, Bedford West 10, we're negotiating the development agreement now with the developer. And the water quality monitoring program under all those development agreements is set up to be the same, so we have consistency over time. So to that end, sampling under this program takes place in the spring. We hire a consultant to do this in the summer and in the fall every year, and we receive the results of that sampling program. Then we deliver the report to Northwest Community Council, which we did in April, to you and RWAB and to the developer. We are currently reporting for the 2019, 2020, and 2021 and 2022 sampling seasons. And I want to say it's only the reporting that we're behind on. The sampling took place on schedule as necessary, like, as dictated by the development agreement throughout the process for all these 4 years. We're just reporting the results from these 4 years now. So the main exceedances that we're seeing under this program repeatedly are phosphorus. It was not observed at all sites to be in excess of 10 milligram or micrograms per liter, but it was observed to be an exceedance at every sampling event at least some sites in all 4 years. And this 10 micrograms per liter threshold, that's a threshold that's determined as the management criteria for these lakes, and that's to maintain its current trophic status. So this isn't like an aesthetic objective or a water quality objective from Health Canada or from Nova Scotia Environment and Climate Change or CCME, but that's the management threshold that has been established for Peebermill Lake and Kearney Lake. So that's what we're measuring against. And then also we saw a lot of E. coli exceedances as well, and that is a threshold of 400 colony forming units per 100 milliliters, and that's the Health Canada recreational guideline. We also saw some non-compliant events in at least one site and at least one sampling event over the course of the 4 years. And there was a lot of data here. So the reports are public now. So if anyone's interested in really getting into the weeds, we'd be happy to share that to the clerk after this meeting. But it felt like too much to go into the real weeds about in this presentation. So these are the thresholds here, not the values that we're seeing. But we saw low dissolved oxygen in a few instances. And so that's less than 5.5 milligrams per liter. And that's the environmental quality standards from the province. We also saw aluminum in several instances over the 5 microgram per liter threshold, but we also saw in some cases also above the 100 microgram per liter threshold set by the CCME. So that's for freshwater aquatic life health. Then also in some instances, specifically in the spring, we saw chloride over 120 milligrams per liter, and that's the CCME freshwater aquatic life guidelines as well. And in a couple instances, not many, we also saw high iron. So those are the main non-compliant values. We are considering reevaluating some of the sampling locations this year for the program, because some of the areas where it's being sampled, we suspect the water is stagnant based on the reports that the consultants are bringing back. And so not to say that these are not true values, like we trust the values that are being delivered in the sampling program that's being done. We're just not totally sure that they're representing actual conditions in the lake in all instances. So for the 2023 season, we will not, we're continuing to go on under the development agreements as they are, but as we negotiate Bedford West 10, we may be looking to change the sampling locations just to get better representative samples. So these are I just have for the next 3 slides are, these are the phosphorus levels that we're seeing in the lake. So these really high one, for example, the black line here, that's 2019. It is high. That was after a major rainfall event is why we think we saw such high phosphorus in that one in particular. And this red dotted line here, that's the 10 microgram per liter threshold. So you can see there's quite a lot of exceedances over the years of phosphorus. And the lake is still, it's not a eutrophic lake, like it's still in a relatively low trophic state, but these indicate that may be changing. So this is the spring sampling, and again, each of these colored lines is a different year. And then here, yeah.
The full reports you referred to, would they have maps showing these sampling locations? I'm not familiar with the codes for those locations, so I was wondering if we could see those in a map.
Sure. Yeah, I can send that around. Definitely. I can give you a quick like overview. So most of these, the KLs are all in Kearney Lake. There's then the D1 is the deep water station. The other are all closer to land. There's two, the Highway 102 are both in a like stream ditch, connecting Paper Mill Lake and Kearney Lake. And then the LSD and the LU, that LU is Larry UTEC, but those are both also in a stream. And then we have Paper Mill 1, Paper Mill 2, Paper Mill 3. Those are all in the PML 1, PML 2. Those are all in Paper Mill Lake. And yes, the sample locations are in the maps in the reports. Pardon?
It would be great if we could see those whenever you are able to send them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can even, when I'm through the presentation, I can throw up a map on my screen again too, if that would be helpful.
Well, I don't know, it may not be necessary tonight, but I would just like to have a look at the reports.
Okay, yeah, no problem.
Thanks.
Yeah, okay, so again, this is the spring or the summer sampling results. And so again, these two really high black lines were right after a high rainfall event after a dry period. So we think that that's why there's such high numbers at those two sites. But again, it's not, you know, it's quite an exceedance. And like I said, the developer has been notified of these exceedances, and we think they're, you know, they're meeting the erosion and sedimentation control programs outlined under their development agreements. So, but these are the results for summer for the 4 years, and then fall. And that one high phosphorus also is just after a high rainfall event. And that Larry UTEC site is it gets intermittent flow. So we think the water level might have been low, but that is that's the results for fall for the 4 years. And then so future reporting, so we're going to recommence reporting on a more regular basis to Northwest Community Council, this group here, and the developer. And so under the terms of the development agreement going forward, we'll be reporting exceedances 3 times annually when we receive the analysis from the consultant. And so that will go, I believe the process is it goes to Northwest Community Council first and then RWAB, and we just talk to the developer directly. So that's how we're reporting from now on. And we'll get an annual report at the end of the year that will come to you in a presentation like this. And also the monitoring and reporting will continue for the duration of the period of all of the Bedford West development agreements. And again, there'll be 13 of those in total. And then under the terms of development agreement for 2 years after the completion of the final development. And as one note, so as I said, HRM is negotiating the development agreement now for Bedford West 10, which is the former quarry site. It's kind of like a gray cutout just across the lake from Kearney Lake Beach near Hamshaw Drive. So there's a development, and it is one of the provincial future planning areas, you may remember. And so that development is under negotiation now, and we just got like a rough timeline for you folks, just so you can have an idea of how long that development is going to take, so we can have an idea of how much longer this water quality monitoring program will be going on based on this one development. And they are expecting to break ground in spring 2024 pending approvals coming through. And then the main approval that they're waiting on now is the province is planning traffic upgrades to the Kearney Lake Road Highway 102 interchange, and that work needs to complete for them to get the density that they're looking for on this development. And then once they break ground, they expect it will be roughly 8 to 10 years for full occupancy on the site. And there are still 2 further sub areas under Bedford West development agreements that are not yet in front of HRM staff for negotiation. So that's at least 10 to 12 years more monitoring just based on that one development. So just to give you an idea of how long we expect to be engaged in this water quality monitoring program. And I think, yeah, that's it. I will happy to take questions.
Members, questions or comments?
I have a question. Maybe it's in the report, not in the presentation we were sent. Is there a way to correlate the amount of open ground, say, or as the development each year? Like, is there more acreage open up? Can you correlate that with any of the peaks or changes in water quality?
We That isn't, so the reports that we'll be sharing with you are reports from the consultants specific to the water quality results. So it's not a larger comment on the development. Like we work with a consultant specifically to carry out the water quality program, and then they report on that, and that's what I'm reporting on. As far as, I mean, the development density in this area is certainly denser. I don't know the answer to your question, but I can look it up and we can get back to you.
Yeah, I think it was just in your comments, a supposition that, oh, it could be because of a certain rainfall event, or is there more grounds exposed to, more sediment going in from a particular area, or is it a finished developed area that's still exporting sediment?
It's kind of both in Bedford West.
Yeah. Well, maybe.
Yeah, it's kind of both, because like some of these sub areas, development started in 2006, 2007. So they're done. They're communities that people are living in. And so like we would expect sediment transfer from those to be more like the kind that you would just see in an urban environment but because of the way they've divided the sub areas up, it like, in a particular sub area, it's finished or it's not, but there are, sub areas right next to each other where one development is finished and another development is ongoing. And because like the water quality monitoring program is just one program, we're not like source tracking back to a specific sub area under the development. I don't think we could, I think you could make assumptions based on like GIS, like, and watching like aerial imagery and seeing development over time, but we're not specifically tracking that under this water quality monitoring program. Does that answer your question?
Yep. Okay. Another question in terms of setting the threshold at the upper oligotrophic level, is it reasonable to expect urban watercourses to be oligotrophic and not range between oligotrophic and mesotrophic not being bad, like the 20 microgram per liter?
Yeah, I think that was set because the Kearney Lake and Paper Mill Lake specifically were like identified as being in the lower oligotrophic range, like before the work started. And so I think the threshold was chosen more as to like maintain current trophic status and not, not cause a nutrient increase in the lake. Like not saying that mesotrophic is bad, just trying not to, upset the trophic status of the lake due to the development is my understanding of why that was chosen.
Okay. And like I said, it's not unreasonable to allow urban lakes to be in the mesotrophic range. It's just hemming things in and expectations and having those lines in the sand are always, if you exceed them, can be for some folks alarming. So it's like, it's
yes,
not early, like, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's decades, going back, years aging myself, back in the 80s and 90s, I used to sample Paper Mill Lake. So there is historical data that might be interesting to bring that forward and see is how much has it really changed.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, I'll be done.
Thanks, Martin. I think you're next on the list for the question.
I'm having trouble unmuting. Oh no, I'm good. Okay.
Good.
My question relates to biological indicators of aquatic ecosystem health. You've shown us that you're monitoring minerals and a couple of microorganisms you've referred to. Is there a suite of biological indicators of aquatic ecosystem health that has been or is being developed for monitoring the condition of lakes under situations in which development is ongoing? I think I would suggest that we might need a bit more than statements of lakes being oligotrophic, eutrophic, or mesotrophic. That's pretty crude in terms of indicators.
Yeah, I mean, short answer, no, we're not monitoring for biological indicators. I think like this program, and we didn't maybe explain this well, it was part of the negotiated development agreement, and I think this was, it's a negotiation. It was a compromise, what was achievable and manageable, and also, this is like almost 20-year-old, like some of the terms of these development agreements are almost 20 years old. So, you know, we definitely know more now than as a municipality than we did when this started. But no, short answer. And I mean, note taken, like you're right. It's a blunt measurement that we're taking now, but it does align with the other water quality monitoring that we do under other programs. Emma, did you want to add anything?
Well, I was just gonna say, like, there is field data that's taken in terms of like temperature, pH, those kinds of things. So it's not lab samples that are taken, but and I agree. Like, you know, if we were to have a very holistic program, we could think about like things like the benthic invertebrates and what other kind of biological indicators that we could include. But as Elizabeth said, this was part of the development agreement that was from 2004, I believe. And we're bound by what's in that development agreement to stick to that plan. Like we can't drastically change the the monitoring requirements.
Yeah, and I mean, we can learn for future, you know, we can try and do better in the future, but Emma's right. We are a little hemmed in on this one in particular.
I would just like to say that I think the role of this committee is to be forward-looking and to make recommendations on things like that. So if indeed there's a desire to improve the monitoring, then let's see it done.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Stu Campana, got a question?
Thanks very much for this, Elizabeth. I was just wondering if you're seeing any other big picture conclusions, drawing big picture conclusions from trends you're seeing in the data.
The main trend that we're seeing is that phosphorus is in exceedance. And I think it would be safe to say that, I mean, we're not sampling at such a frequency that we can make like really major statements, because a lot of the values are really low, and like even when they're in exceedance, they're not that much in exceedance except really for phosphorus. So when you're seeing like, you know, the trend line it's not that bad, actually. I would say we are seeing phosphorus increases in especially Kearney Lake, but maybe Paper Mill Lake as well. And I think like when we're able to compare it to longer term data under like our Lake Watchers Lake Management Program, and as well, it'll be easier to draw trends, like just combining the data sets that we have under this program with the new stuff that we're gathering as well. But I think there is some trend analysis in the reports, and if that's something that you are interested in, that can be something that we include more explicitly in these presentations going forward. Like for sure, I can do that. But I think right now, the main thing that we're seeing is like a slow increase in like phosphorus concentration, and some of that is probably development derived. Some of it is also probably to do with pH rebound in the lake and like sediment release, like release of phosphorus from the lake sediment as well.
Sounds like something where you're going to need a wider data set in order to reach firm conclusions.
Yeah, and I mean that is a limitation of these development water quality monitoring programs. Like from our perspective, we'd like to see more holistic thinking around land use management around the lake watershed. I think is what our team's long-term goals would be in an ideal world, rather than, you know, getting these, not that this district data set doesn't help inform that, I think is the way what we would be looking at it more. Emma, did you want to add anything? Okay.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. I would just comment, my recollection is that Kearney Lake and Paper Mill Lake were part of the original HRM lake sampling program, going back a couple of decades, and I'm challenging my own memory because I was the one doing the sampling. But in terms of trend analysis, you at least should have some historical data that you can compare prior to the developments happening and compare that to the current situation.
Yes, we have lots of your good data Tony.
If I can
Mimi,
make some comments, or
sorry, Shalom, we have Mimi had her hand up prior to, so we'll just get to her and then we'll hear from you.
okay, sure.
Thanks, Tony, and thanks, Elizabeth, for the presentation. I just want to echo Martin's points about the biological indicators, that if we are forward thinking, I think that is really important to be looking at. I also had a question about the longevity of the monitoring. You said it would be monitored until 2 years after the development is done. Do you know why it was settled upon 2 years? I know you mentioned that it was back in like 2004, so it might be a little bit before your time with HRM. So you don't know why? Okay.
I don't know. No, I mean, Tony,
Okay.
Tony, do you know?
Sorry, no, I wouldn't have been involved in actually drafting the development agreements, so no, I don't know about those terms.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think the water quality monitoring program was developed based on like scientific understanding at the time, but I don't know. And I mean, and it's 2 years after the completion of the final development, so that'll be like 12 developments finished, like done and dusted probably, and then the final one will be done, and then 2 years after that. So, but yeah, no, I don't know. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Do you think there would be an opportunity for HRM to continue monitoring beyond that agreement?
Not under this program, because this
Okay.
water quality monitoring is being paid for by the developer. Like as part of the development agreement, we contract out the work and supervise it, and they pay for it. But we are monitoring both these lakes under the like HRM water quality monitoring program, and that's more in depth. But all the parameters that we're measuring under this program, we would be measuring under that program, and it samples the lake deep, like at the deepest point of the lake and the outlet. So some of like there will still be data collection happening in these lakes even after this is finished.
Okay, great. Thanks for that clarification.
Thank you. Shalom, I believe you had something?
Yeah, Dr. Blown, I had to apologize. I'm new to this Zoom on cell phone, so I don't know where to click. That's why I speak. That's what Elizabeth McDonald told me to do that, So just to raise the sound. Anyway, I am in line with everybody who spoke so far, especially with Professor Martin Willison, whom I used to know very well in the old days. You have to go beyond the trophic states. You have to also go into biodiversity and everything. And there are two things I want to mention to you. My team is kind of sleeping now, but when my team was active, we carried out extensive biodiversity of Paper Mill and Kearney, among other lakes. Okay, it was all done by qualified biologists. And I gave those reports to Cameron DeKoff, used to be in your department. Okay, you have them. And now somebody, I forgot who, but somebody was mentioning, I think you, Dr. Blumen, that one has to look at long-term data. Well, I've developed Excel spreadsheets, and some of the data goes back to the 1950s. And you have the data from Pat Lane and Associates, which are very smart consultants. By the way, Dr. Blumen did his PhD under Pat Lane, and also from Jake Whitford and CWRS and our own team, and they're all there. So you're welcome to you. Can download it. I didn't restrict that. What's the right word? I removed the password for the OneDrive, and but if you have a problem, you all know my email. Just send it to me, and I'll send it to you within 24 hours. That quick. Thank you.
Sorry, I dropped out there, but you have that data on your OneDrive?
Yeah, it is on the OneDrive. And one more, if you have a problem, as you know, I only live 1/3 mile from your office. I can come over there and show you. No obligation. I won't charge you.
Thank you. Very much appreciated.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I was familiar with Mr. Mandeville's data sets when I worked with HRM, and yeah, he's got quite a good historical data set to draw on there. Okay, anyone else with a comment or question on this item? If not, then I think we can move on, and thank you, Elizabeth. I think we can move on to.
I think
Oh.
Sue has her hand up.
Just despite Shalom's generous offer, just a wee bit of caution. and I've been a consultant myself. Some of that data is proprietary, and you can't. It's not may not be in public form just to hand out. Just just a check.
Okay, well, we'll have to confirm that.
Somebody paid for it. It's theirs. So just
Yeah,
like
it
the
depends on the
developers, all
source.
the developers have all that historical data.
Okay, well, we'll rely on Mr. Manville to know, from what sources he's drawing, and I'm sure he's confirmed whether he can release those or not.
What was that question for me?
Well, just a general question about availability of data, whether data is proprietary or not. So depending on what source the original data came from, if it was private data paid for by a private entity, that it may not be publicly available.
I can answer that question very quickly with examples. The one of the Pat Lane and Associates did a lot of work on paper mill that came from town of Bedford, so it was official. And then other data, Jake Whitford and CWRS and our own, they were all came from HRM, and you were partly responsible, if you remember, when I had trouble getting it, and you got it from me. So I would say it's not proprietary because the municipality paid for it. I'm not talking about the data which the developer paid for. That's not what I'm talking about. What the municipality paid for. Dr. Pat Lane's data, which was very extensive. She was a professor in limnology at Dalhousie. It was paid for the town of Bedford. In fact, I used to attend their public meetings as an old timer. I'm in my 80s, by the way, so I've been all around. So they're not proprietary.
Okay, good. Well, thank you for that confirmation. Okay, the next item then would be.
Has a presentation for us regarding watershed mapping. Martin, do you want to proceed with that, please?
Hello, yes. Let me try and share my screen.
So Martin, I'm just promoting you to co-host right now. Just
Okay.
hold on a moment there. All right, so you should be able to share your screen now.
Okay. Let me see what I can do. Do you see my screen?
No.
Let me go back. Oh. I see my screen. Does anybody else?
No, sir, not yet.
I can share my screen, Martin. I have it here.
Okay.
Just hold on a moment there.
It's probably simply inexperience on my part. Oh, I see. There's a share button now. Wait a minute. I might be able to do it.
Yeah, we can see your screen.
Okay, it was the share button that I missed.
Perfect. There you go.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So let me first of all explain why I brought this forward. As Shalom mentioned, I knew him when we were both on the Lakes and Waterways Advisory Board of Halifax, as opposed to, this was before the amalgamation. At that time, as I say, it was called the Lakes and Waterways Advisory Board rather than the Watersheds Advisory Board. And I think updating this to a Watersheds Advisory Board is a great idea. Long ago, I made an organization called the Macintosh Run Watershed Association, and because focusing on watersheds is sensible from an understanding and education point of view. So having joined this board, I thought I should look for mapping of watersheds within the municipality, and I was a bit distressed to find there didn't seem to be any suitable maps that at least were at a level of detail that would let me be able to properly understand what was going on. So here are my main points. I'm going to say that maps are essential tools for understanding watersheds, that the publicly available maps that I can find anyway of HRM watersheds are very old. Much better mapping can be achieved nowadays because of LiDAR particularly, but also GIS makes it possible to make very good maps. In order for people to understand the need for good mapping of watersheds, because some people don't even know what a watershed is, we need examples of the inadequacies in mapping so that it can be understood, particularly by decision makers at the political level. And I've been a long time advocate for citizen science. That is, I think that getting people, the public, involved in watershed management, and for that matter, mapping too, is an important thing. The more people we can draw into this, the better. So this is what the primary watersheds of HRM that I can find look like. These maps were made in 1981, which is for some people possibly here before they were born. And you can see that these are described as primary watersheds. It's not what they really are, but it's a classification system that is useful. If we take the Sackville River watershed, as it's called, I've marked here where the watershed itself of the Sackville River is, but you can see that there's a lot of this land which is not actually in any way associated with the Sackville River, but which is defined as the Sackville primary watershed. There's the Sackville watershed itself. There's a system, a classification system for Nova Scotia, which defines what are called as secondary watersheds. It's a bit of an unusual way to do it, but we have lots of these. I forget the number, but anyway, over 100 secondary watersheds in HRM. No, maybe not in HRM, but anyway, there are lots of secondary watersheds. And these again were defined in 1981, which is an awful long time ago. So here's what the map looks like for the Sackville River watershed area, or the Sackville watershed area. And I've identified two of these. If you can see my arrow, here's number 204, which is the Sackville River itself. And because I live here and have taken interest in a long time in the McIntosh Run watershed, you can see that is here, 135. Let's have a look in detail at 135 as mapped in 1981. And oddly, it includes two watersheds of significance for us here. The Chain Lakes and Chocolate Lake is combined with Long Lake and McIntosh Run as if it were a single watershed. And you'll also see, if you know this area well, that Williams Lake and the Frog Pond watersheds are combined, as it were. Simply, this map isn't capable of going down to watersheds at that level. So I'm sorry, you'll see that everything's kind of written under there, but I've said what's important. So this is a map made by Professor Ogden, 1983, showing the watersheds in this part of Halifax, the part that I'm concerned with, and happens to be where I live, so I know it particularly well. And we can see here the light blue is the McIntosh Run and Long Lake watershed. You can see that I here is the watershed down to Williams Lake, including Culpit Lake. I noted, by the way, that there's an error in here. He was called Pete. Pete Ogden didn't get it quite right, and he ran the what's that now? The Catamaran Pond outlet straight down into Williams Lake, but it actually runs down to Culpit and then it goes into Williams. But these maps typically have errors like that, and we need to improve them. But this anyway is an ancient map, let's be fair. So there's Chocolate Lake. It's one of the lakes of concern. Here's Long Lake. It's one of the lakes of concern identified by HRM being a lake of concern for this board. This is Williams Lake, another lake of concern. And this is Kidston Lake, a lake of concern. These are all lakes of concern because people swim in them. I don't know if there are any other reasons why they would be identified. So nowadays we can make much better maps. And let's jump forward to the present time. This is a 2023 map, which was, I got prepared by requesting it. And it shows Withrod Lake and Long Lake. And even though this is a 2023 map, it still contains an error. That is, it's, oops, sorry, my apologies. Let me do, oh yes, there we go. Let me throw in these two little circles here. And you can see an outlet from Withrod Lake into Long Lake. It doesn't matter, it's not an important little stream, but it's in the wrong place. Actually, Withrod Lake doesn't drain north, it drains south. And even our 2023 mapping doesn't have it quite right. My understanding is that it is possible with ArcGIS just to automate the process of the drawing of watershed boundaries and get streams in the right place. But I suspect that in that particular case, the resolution isn't sufficient to be able to figure it out. That is, it would need to be manually corrected, all that. But I don't know, I'm not an expert in that. So one of the lakes of particular interest to the community in which I live is Kidston Lake. Kidston Lake is a headwater lake. It's pristine, pretty good anyway. And there is, HRM has a beach on it, which is used for swimming, and there are lifeguards in the summer. This lake is as good as it is in very large part because there is no development other than HRM's own development of a school and playground and a sports field which slopes away from the watershed, from which water might run into it. There's no housing in this case. So I think that we should be proactive in the case of a lake like this. And we should try to ensure that we don't make the mistakes that we've made in the past with respect to development. And by some means, I don't know the means by which this can be achieved, it'd probably be after my time anyway, but by some means, we should be able to ensure that this watershed is fully protected and the lake is retained in its relatively pristine condition as it is now. It will be really easy to damage this lake in the manner in which other lakes within HRM have been damaged by development. Be very, very easy because it has no permanent streams that run into it. There are just trickles of water that go into it. It therefore flushes extremely slowly. It will therefore go down very quickly if any development occurs within its watershed, which is very small. However, I've just drawn a black line around it because I've done the best that I can based upon Google mapping, and it's far, and knowing the particular place. So it's far from accurate, but it could be done very well by HRM staff using data that are available in ArcGIS, and we could know where this watershed is, which will then allow us proactively to ensure that future management is better and is more appropriate for protecting water quality in this lake. Let's get ourselves to the point where we are proactive rather than reactive in lake management to the extent that we can in the future. I know there are some lakes, basically it's hopeless now. We're fighting a rearguard battle every day for them. But in the case of some lakes, and this is an example, I just take it as an example, we're in a good position to be able to protect this into the long-term future. So that's what I want to say. And my conclusions are the same as they always say at the beginning what you're going to say and then say it again at the end. Maps are essential tools for managing watersheds. HRM watershed maps are currently inadequate. Better mapping can be achieved with modern methods. Examples of mapping inadequacies may help HRM Council in its decision making. It's not cheap to make maps, so this is I'm asking for a big task here, and I think that the more people we can involve in ground proofing these maps, the better. I believe that HRM citizens will actually enjoy looking at the maps and saying, you know what, there's an error here. Hey guys, fix this. It's a way to draw the public into the process of managing our natural resources and natural ecosystem. Thank you. That's my point. And I did suggest that we might want to make a motion in this matter. However, that's not for me to decide, only to recommend that I do think that we should communicate with the committee that lies above us about this particular matter. Thank you.
Sorry,
Thank
just
you,
close it.
Martin. I was just going to ask Tony if you'd rather do kind of questions first, or if you'd rather discuss the possibility of a motion. I was thinking maybe questions first to see if anyone has anything they'd like to ask, but it's up to you, Tony.
Okay, no, that sounds good. It's probably useful to ask if anyone has any questions for Martin at this point.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I waited for somebody else, but nobody said something. So I'm going to say that Dr. Martin Willison, who, as I said, I used to know him for years, he used to be a guest on my TV show or host. And anyway, I want to tell him that my team, not just me alone, there were many others, engineers and planners and biologists. We did watershed mapping for 1,000 lakes in the metro area, 1,000. And you had that when you were in the HRM. And we have updated that. And they're also available online for free. Nobody needs my permission. And what we did the sub-watersheds and the amount of land that's developed and what it is developed for, whether it's lands and forests, or if it is, public lands, or septic systems, or service lands, or commercial area. That's all available for anybody for free. And you used that actually for Russell Lake and Morris Lake. I don't know if you remember that. When you said the 15 micrograms per liter, phosphorus limit. And so it is available to anybody. And when we did the mapping, we actually used them at HRM's GIS mapping. And again, Dr. Tony Bluen was the one who got me the permission or thing. So I've not forgotten any of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Shalom. Google doesn't find them.
No, it's on my OneDrive. Google does not search OneDrives. I already checked on that.
Perhaps, Shalom, could we ask you to just provide the link through the clerk's office, just so all the members would be able to access that?
I'll send a general email to Elizabeth McDonald, whom I got to know very well this week. She was helping me with the Zoom.
We're figuring out Zoom together. Yeah, you can just send that to me and I can distribute it to the board tomorrow.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. So perhaps we can all have a look at Mr. Mandeville's watershed mapping data there and see whether that provides what Martin is looking for at that level of detail, and perhaps take it from there.
I had to add something. The Excel spreadsheets has the amount of land that's being developed and for what, but we didn't have the map there. I just want to caution you on that. But we do have the flow charts, what lake drains into what lake. We have the flow charts for almost all of it.
As I recall that, yes. So anyway, yeah, so we should have a look at your mapping and see if that provides the kind of information that Martin is seeking, and that would be useful to all of us.
Thank you.
Could I ask, does any other member have a question for Martin or a comment? Hearing none. So I guess at this point, we need to decide what our next step is. I am advised by the clerk's office that if we want to make a recommendation to HRM, and as Ed Martin had said, that would be in the form of a motion from the board, which would go to the Environment and Sustainability Standing Committee of HRM. So we would be advising them on our own behalf, you know, that we would like to see HRM undertake detailed mapping perhaps. And
Tony, may I just jump in on that?
Yeah,
Yes.
actually, I was gonna say, I think it would be, what I'll do is, sorry to interrupt you, Emma. I'm going to send, we had kind of a very rough draft motion written up. I'll put that in the chat, but we did want to consult with staff to see what you think the best steps would be going forward.
So
But
I
I'll
will
just put
say-
that in the chat for everyone.
That's great. Thanks, Elizabeth. I will say that HRM did fly LiDAR data, I want to say 2 years ago, approximately, and maybe this is a circumstance of the data just not having been made super accessible. I do know there's lots of research students who use our LiDAR data. So we do have LiDAR data available. I'm not sure if like the boundaries for secondary watersheds have been made. So all those maps, Martin, that you were sharing were provincial maps, because again, this again goes back to that jurisdictional gray area of whose responsibility is it to make these maps kind of thing. We do have a fair number of maps that were created for Lake Watchers last year. So those are available to share if they're of interest for you, for some of the watersheds for the lakes that are monitored through Lake Watchers. So HRM does have data, some mapping data available. And I would recommend checking out our open data website to see which of those layers are available.
Yeah, I have looked at the open data. Problem for me is I can't use it, and I think that would be the case for most of the public too. If somebody wants to see a map, it has to be something which is publicly accessible and meaningful. So,
Yeah.
And you need to include 80-year-olds like me and people who are, let's say, under 14, because this is something it's intuitive. You look at the map and it leaps out at you and it has meaning. But if it's a data set that requires some fiddling with, then it's really not accessible. It's only nominally accessible. And yes, sure, it's accessible for grad students who have expertise to deal with it, but it isn't for the general public.
That's excellent feedback, and we'll take that into consideration.
Thank you.
Looks like we have David and Sue both have their hands raised.
Yes. David, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, so I am a big proponent of open data. I think it's fantastic. I'm happy to see, I've been a beneficiary of HRM's open data portal. Through my own research, I'm still a student, still using it. I'm using LiDAR data myself around the Pockwalk watershed to model their catchments. So I actually have some experience using ArcHydro, which is an extension to ArcGIS products to help you do that watershed mapping. But one thing I do want to sort of caution with some experience in that, and just sort of coming back to something that you yourself mentioned, Martin, is that, we have these older maps, there are mistakes in them, and we want to try and avoid publishing products that have mistakes in them. And so from the outside understanding of the production of products like this is that they're typically very demand driven. So when there's a specific demand for something, it will be produced. And a lot of the products that are currently available on the HRM Open Data Portal were developed for a purpose. And then the question is, well, should they be shared with the public? Why not, right? We'll put them on there. But somebody's done all the work to verify them. So I have mapped the 6,000 hectares around Pockwalk and produced subcatchment maps and drainage patterns. And I've gone through the painstaking work of correcting drainage lines where I know for a fact they're different than what the extension would have guessed based on LiDAR. And like you mentioned, LiDAR is available, but I totally get it. It's hard to access. But on the same vein of let's not put out bad products, to do a watershed map of the HRM would be a really big undertaking. And to avoid the kinds of mistakes that you have noticed around the lake there around Spryfield, one of the ones in Macintosh, that sort of thing, you know, Google Maps sees it one way, Esri sees it another way. So those sorts of issues are going to crop up everywhere. And so without somebody taking like pretty much a full-time job for a year to produce this sort of thing, HRM would be very much at risk of putting out a map that is full of mistakes that could be highly consequential. And so I don't know, I'm on the fence about this one, because I see that if it isn't given a full effort to ensure absolute correctness, it could almost cause more problems than it could solve, because you could be giving people confidence in a data set. So that's my 2 cents on that. But I like the idea. I'm just cautious about the authority that it gets as being an official product of HRM.
Okay, thank you, David.
Thank you.
Sue, you have your hand up.
Yep, just a check. Back a lot in the day, the province had quite a comprehensive sub-watershed mapping drawing the old-fashioned way, and they were going to digitize that. Did they ever get around to doing that? That was probably 20 years ago. Like, no, nobody knows. Anyhow, there is maybe to Martin's point that there's mistakes in there too, but it was the whole province pretty much that those are resources I used to use for starting off with, but opposed to hand-drawn like good old Pete. Yeah, so there's that database is out there, and they said they were going to digitize it.
Okay, might be possible for HRM to investigate whether that is digitized and available at this point. Seeing no other hands up, I would just direct people's attention to the chat. I think the clerk's office has put up a couple of drafts of a possible motion. Personally, I prefer the second draft that they've put there, that the regional watershed advisory.
Oh, sorry. You go. I was just sorry to interrupt. I'm just chatting with Emma here, and we're just talking about kind of what the municipality's role is to play, and if this is our role to play in this situation. But I will let you read the motion.
Okay, well, HRM would of course have to determine what its role is, if it has a role or not, and if it feels that it does have a role, then what sort of a level of effort would it be willing to put into this? I could envision perhaps hiring a consultant to develop the mapping, but I don't know. That's obviously would be HRM and council's decision. But I was just going to note the second draft of a motion that the clerk's office provided, that the regional watershed advisory, it's actually watershed advisory board, recommend that the environment sustainability standing committee request the CAO to prepare a staff report on undertaking comprehensive watershed mapping exercise and provide the data to the general public and board. That seems to me a reasonable recommendation that we could make to the standing committee, and then it would be up to the HRM staff through the CAO to develop a report, and their report would provide whatever position they might take on this, whether it is their responsibility or not, and if so, what level of effort and what sort of an exercise could they do for watershed mapping. But so I'd invite any comment from any of the members in regard to that draft motion, or comments on what would we like to try to present to the standing committee? Yeah, yes, Susan.
Just a question on what you mean by exercise. A bit vague to me.
I didn't write it, so I didn't choose that word.
Yeah, no, I just
mapping
just putting that out
exercise.
there.
Yeah, well, to me, it would just would mean, you know, an effort to develop comprehensive watershed mapping. Now, comprehensive, you know, perhaps we could define it, you know, down to a certain level of detail in watershed mapping, but as just a first.
Yeah,
draft.
that honestly exercise probably could be taken out. Yeah, just develop comprehensive watershed mapping. And I will make sure that that area there that it says committee is changed to board.
Oh, I see. It's already changed.
What's the end goal? That's all I'm referring to. Like, yeah. Like.
Well, I think we would be trying to address, you know, the points and the requirement that Martin has brought forward. Hopefully, it would be, you know, some sort of an effort to develop the watershed mapping down to an adequate level of detail. And that would be of use then to the general public and to public groups and non-governmental interest groups and other levels of government.
So if there's a sufficient,
Martin, you have
see if there's a province has a sufficient embedded system already to work upon, opposed to starting from scratch. Like,
yes, I assume that would be part of the exercise of developing a staff report. You know, that HRM would look at different options and what is or is not available at this time. Martin, do you want to say something there?
Oh, yes, I'm willing to move this motion, which you seem to have sensibly adapted, because I think it would be very useful for this committee to hear from staff on what they think is realistic with respect to what they can develop in order to assist us in our work, and also for clarity on whether or not anything they can develop for us would also be available to the general public. I think it should be, because David's point about open data is excellent. I'm also strongly in favor of those things that can be public being public. And I see no reason why there should be any secrecy with respect to maps of watersheds.
Oh, I certainly agree, and I would certainly expect it would be public. I know that HRM has made all of the water quality data that they've collected is always
exactly. So I move the motion as modified and hope for a seconder.
Okay, call for seconder.
I second with some one comment, okay?
Yes, sir. Okay.
The Nova Scotia Community, I forgot the name of it, Community College in Lawrencetown. They have a very good GIS capability. Okay, they're a public institution, and they did excellent work on Lake Bunnock and Lake Micmac. They even mapped the amount of weeds in the lake, and that's what bothers a lot of people on Morris Lake and Bissett Lake. So I'd like to add that mapping also to include the amount of weeds in the lake. If Professor Willison agrees to that.
Sorry, everyone. I'm sorry to jump in and to interrupt. Shalom. I wanted to say, as the staff that will probably this report will be sent to, I do think that this is more of a provincial jurisdiction. The maps Martin originally showed were all provincial maps, and I know they're outdated, but I also know the province has also flown LiDAR as well. So they also would have that data available. And I recognize that that's not the most accessible. What we can commit to from today is to say that we will make maps more, the mapping features and layers and what information we have, we can definitely make that information more available and point people of who to contact and all those things. So just to, as David had mentioned earlier, this is a very extensive process and would be very painstaking, and we are already short-staffed to begin with. So I'm not sure if where this would go.
Maybe I didn't explain. the Institute, I think it's called the Geographic Institute or something. HRM did use them in Lake Bannock and Micmac. So it was paid by what do you call municipal taxpayers. So to expanding that to 1,100 lakes might be a massive thing. I agree.
Okay, so we have the motion, and Shalom has seconded it. Now, I know, Shalom, you suggested that they could also include mapping of weeds.
I just
Lake,
wanted,
I'm not
sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to add that if we are speaking about provincial mapping, the motion in that case would be out of order if it is provincial mapping that we're looking at rather than municipal.
Well, I think my understanding is that the motion that the board would be making to the standing committee would be that HRM undertake an effort to develop maps. Now, perhaps using whatever may be available from existing sources, of course. We would be asking HRM to undertake this, not the province.
Right. No, I understand that, but if it is, I'm just trying to figure out if it's a provincial jurisdiction. I know, Emma, you touched on that.
So HRM does have LiDAR, and we do have mapping, and of course maps could be made by anybody, but watersheds are and I would say the lakes and rivers, that mapping I think would fall under the province. And so I wonder if maybe we should clarify that before a vote goes through. If it could be,
I think that would be a good idea.
I think we are planning to, we're hoping to have another RRAB meeting in June, so we could potentially kind of make sure we're in order before voting on this. Because I would hate for this to move forward and it not be A, in order, or B, not for you to vote to say yes, and then staff to come back and just say no because we can't do it, kind of thing. So I think that would be more efficient of our time. Krista, do you have anything to add to that, or Elizabeth McDonald?
No, that makes sense. Thank you for explaining that. Elizabeth Montgomery, I just wanted to see if she had anything to add, another staff perspective.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with Emma on this one. I mean, you are looking at the two staff people that this would come to, and just knowing, I can't speak to the jurisdiction of this, and I agree that we need improved maps, but I can't think of any other instance of the municipality doing this. And so like doing mapping, we use GIS and we develop like layers on GIS, but developing the base maps, that's not typically something that we do, and something that we have the in-house expertise to do. And I think, Martin, you said earlier, I think you're right. I think there are over 100 secondary watersheds in HRM. And so I think, I don't want to shut this down, because I agree with you that it would be really beneficial to have, but I think what we're able to achieve to the level of detail that you're looking for, I just want to be frank that I don't know that it would go anywhere. So I think I don't know. I think I just would want to caution that we make sure, they've said that we're in order and this is something that we can do. And I don't want to say no, but I can't think of any other instance where the municipality has developed their own mapping from scratch. I think typically we're using provincial layers and then adding on to them.
I understand what you're saying. And I think as I understood the motion, I thought it was that we were requesting a staff report so that we have something in writing. And it would be very useful to have that. There was also mention of demand-driven mapping, and that's a process. So as opposed to doing the mapping, map all the lakes, or all the watersheds, I understand that this isn't a realistic task. At least it would take years to do. But to define a process by which we can get to that end is not such a complicated thing. It's not the doing of it, it's the process that will result in the doing of it. And that's what I think would be very useful for this committee to receive in a staff report, is that, as you've said, look, this is a desirable end, So how can we get to this end? And that, in a sense, is what I'm requesting, is an understanding of how we can actually achieve what we all seem to agree needs to be achieved. And yes, I agree. We've got another meeting in a month. And by consequence, if we can have more information on this a month from now, then that will be real progress from my point of view.
Okay.
Sue, did you have something to?
Yeah, perhaps the way to get the deliverable is to have it embedded in development plans for land developers to provide this. Because ultimately, they're picking up the ball for water quality monitoring. Maybe it goes back to my very, very first question about the monitoring done for Bedford West, is what's the watersheds that are being impacted as they change, as they terraform the environment. Is there a correlation to changes in water quality downstream? But anyhow, maybe that's a way to go around. Just a suggestion.
Thanks, Sue. Elizabeth,
Me, Elizabeth?
yes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think too, like something else. What is the, like, I guess maybe just so I can get a sense of like to the municipality, aside from the fact that like having this data is valuable and managing watersheds, you know, is something that we're hoping to do a better job of in the future at the municipality. But what specifically, I guess, just for clarification for myself, so when I go look further into this, I kind of know where your head's at. What is the specific value of having the watershed mapping to like that level of detail to us for defining, like for policy development? Like, do we need it to do like, and I don't really have an opinion on this. Like, do we need it to that level of detail, or do you think that the outdated maps, like, you know, with ground truthing as we do this, like, you know, because when we do a development, we do preliminary studies with ground truthing and we do get updated mapping. It's not always public because of the way that it's collected and what for, but or it's not always public, I guess, quickly. But so what would the value be of doing it like for the whole municipality preemptively, I guess? Not that I don't think it's valuable. I just want to hear what you're thinking, I guess.
Well, I can also, to understand the impacts of developing land, you need to know what land is it that's going to drain to a particular river or lake or water body, so that you can say, well, this development in this area is going to impact these water bodies because the drainage goes from that area to them. And you can't do that without understanding the watershed boundaries, because otherwise you won't know where the water's flowing to.
Yeah.
So it's certainly helpful in understanding impacts and in tracing the sources of impacts.
So we do require watershed studies be undertaken prior to development that would define those things, and those are ground truth, and they could be better certainly, and we're working to improve them. But that is, you know, and we start off with the provincial mapping, and then the consultant goes out and makes updates to that mapping based on what they're actually seeing, and again, we could collect and compile and share that data better publicly for sure than we're doing, like no question. And we might receive the GIS files for that. I'm not sure. But we do receive maps that you could look at and understand from those studies. So maybe another potential compromise or something that we could think about and report back next month is like, maybe we can do a better job of taking those maps out of those studies, because sometimes they're massive documents, nobody's reading that, but taking the maps out of those studies and having, like, at least for that, some level of detail for what's been studied, without which, because I think like at the municipality, it's very clear to everyone that that is like clearly within our jurisdiction. And so you would have, like, we do have that development impact mapping done prior to development. Maybe the issue is the way that we're sharing it.
Well, that sounds useful. And, you know, I would also comment that obviously the water bodies you're most concerned about are the ones that are subject to development within their watersheds. You know, a watershed way out on the eastern shore that's got no one living in it is probably not of as much concern. as one located within Dartmouth or Bedford or somewhere that's being developed on an intensive scale. So I'll ask Martin, it's your issue. Do you want to comment on this?
Yeah, to comment more. Well, I would like something to come out of this, and the closer it is to the long-term objective that we have good mapping of all watersheds, the better. I recognize that this is going to take quite a long time. I'm interested in this idea of being demand driven, which is kind of fits with what you're saying, Tony, in that we're not going to get requests from places that are not under any threat of development whatsoever, because we've got plenty of time in that case. I live in mainland South, and there are quite a number of developments that are in the works here. I want to be able to get ahead, and from the communities around me, to be able to get ahead of this so that they have enough knowledge in order to be able to respond appropriately once development proposals come forward. If we don't have the information, then we're immediately on the back foot. If the developer has the information, but the community does not, then we're even further on the back foot, and that's not right. So what I would like to see, at least for the community, well, for all communities in Nova Scotia, or rather in HRM, but at least for the community in which I live, which, as I say, I'm defining at this time as mainland South, I would like to see all of the watersheds in this region properly mapped to as correct a level as reasonably possible, not asking for anything unreasonable, and that these be made available to the public in such a manner that feedback can be provided on them in the sense of ground truthing, as I put it. So that, I mean, yeah, of course, there are going to be errors, you see, and those errors mostly will be minor, but some of them might not be. And I think that local people would be likely willing to be involved in a cooperative manner to provide help with this process. So that's my particular goal here, and I've brought it forward for that reason.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, I found it's interesting to me that such mapping is done in the context of development agreements, and that perhaps could be compiled by HRM and made available. Obviously, that wouldn't be all the watersheds, but it would be a starting point. So I think perhaps where we've arrived at is that we've kind of put a lot of information and requests over to HRM staff, and there are some options. Mr. Mandeville has offered some mapping that he says he has available. So perhaps if we could ask staff to look into all of this, and I think their commitment was that they could come back to us at our next meeting with further information about what might be available currently and what might possibly be done in future. So if we could ask staff to undertake that and come back to us at our next meeting. And I think in that case, we would defer a motion for this meeting and wait and see what comes back from the staff, and then make our own decision about, you know, what sort of motion, if there is a need for a motion, and if so, what should it consist of? What should it ask for? Does that seem reasonable to the members?
That is, oh, sorry. Yes, you would defer the motion. Is two members and Martin in particular, are you agreeable to that, or how do you feel about that?
I'm agreeable to it. Yes, let's bring it back to the next meeting with more information from staff.
All right, so we will need a motion to defer.
Well, I move that to defer to the next meeting.
Okay, thank you, Shalom. A seconder?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, Martin seconds. Those in favor, just a show of hands. And we have some people I think who want to speak to this, Stu.
No, I'm just raising my hand as a show of hands.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry. Okay.
It might be easier if we say all in favor aye and all those opposed, just because we can't see everyone.
Okay, so everyone unmute yourselves, please. And those in favor say aye.
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 And any opposed say nay. No. Okay. So I think the motion is carried. So we will defer this for our next meeting, and we will have HRM staff bring whatever information they can back to us on the topic. All right, so that concludes our agenda items. On our agenda, we are at number 10, added items, and there are none. Date of next meeting has been established. We've approved our meeting schedule for the year, so our next meeting is June 8th. And I guess we will have to determine prior to that whether we will continue meeting virtually on computer, or possibility of meeting in person. If any members, as a group want to do that, we can discuss that.
That is something I thought would be a good thing to, I know we're kind of running out of time here. It's 2 to 7, but to just kind of gauge general interest, if anyone who would be agreeable or interested in holding in-person meetings, who would be open to both.
Okay. So I guess we'll ask members to maybe just send their opinion on that to the clerk sometime prior to the next meeting, and if we have input from everybody or from most of the members, then we can see what the feeling is and come to a decision about our next meeting.
If meetings were held in person, where would they be held?
They would be held at Halifax Hall at City Hall.
Oh, the parking.
The committee could also, sorry, Krista Vining, acting deputy clerk. They could also be held in the Harbor East Marine Drive meeting space. We could certainly look at other available meeting spaces for in person, but we would take that away and have those discussions with the chair, and then we could poll members.
Thank you, Krista.
All right, thanks. So if there's nothing else, I can call for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Move.
David, okay, move the motion. Seconder.
You don't need a seconder, just a mover.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so we have a motion to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? All right. Well, thank you very much to the members and to all of the HRM support staff. And we will see you in June.
See you. Thank you very much, everybody, especially the staff.
Yes, thank you.
I